The safe place in difficult circumstances. I'm quite used to deal with difficult circumstances, and I think you are very well used to. I'm a trauma pedagogue. I work on the field of trauma pedagogy, and I do quite often European projects, Erasmus Plus project, and if I'm well oriented, I think it is such a project you are dealing with. I have some examples from this project, out of this project, to make it understandable how trauma pedagogy is working. And I'm referred to this project. It is still, the website is still active. So it is www.yestermorrow.eu. You find it, and you find a lot of ideas how you can install mental health. It was the main focus, mental health of students, of teachers. Exactly. I told you in this video the story of a 14-year-old girl. She didn't manage to make a knot in her thread during the handicraft lesson, but she managed to cross many borders from, I don't know, Nigeria. I think she came from Nigeria on her own to Switzerland. Her trip took 2 years. Her mother came to her Swiss husband. She met on the internet by plane, but she left her daughter behind. And when she arrived in Switzerland, it was quite difficult for her. And I can assume that the trip was very difficult as well for her. And the problem was that she wasn't doing anything at school, and she didn't talk at school. And that was this example when I was at school. I come back later, and these are the titles. What a trauma is, I think you have read it. It is the gap between the possibility of coping with a situation and the what we have to cope with. So there is a gap, and that provokes a trauma. A trauma is linked to very heavy emotions, the emotion of helplessness, of ineffectiveness, and these emotions, they will be with us during the next 1.5 hours. This helplessness is linked to traumatic experiences. Yeah, trauma pedagogy is based on the newest neurobiological science, and it tells us that in big threat, the cerebral effects can't be managed by the part of the brain. There are situations we can't manage, and I think that's very important to remember. Yeah, it is about the safe place. This knowledge about organic cerebral effects and transferences is extremely important to understand ourselves and to understand the reactions of people we are dealing with. Yeah, here I don't want to tell you too much, but this is the brain, and it's one part of our brain. It's quite a new part, and there is the memory is stored when it is stored in a well-organized way. There we store what we are learning, what we are feeling. So it is a very important part of the brain. And when this part of the brain is on the throne, we can learn easily. We can deal very well with other persons. It's a very good situation. But it doesn't mean that always brain is on the throne. There are situations where when the reptilian part of the brain, that is a very old part of the brain, is climbing on the throne and brain is away. And the reptilian part, it is very, very fast, and that's extremely helpful. But it is a little bit basic. There are three orders. The reptilian brain can order. It is fight, flight, and if this is not possible, it is freeze. So a person who is frozen is in bigger danger than a person who is fighting or on the flight. But very often, especially at school, we can see students fighting, students running away, but sometimes we don't realize that the student is in the state of freeze. And they can't learn. If you have the reptilian brain on the throne, you can't learn. There are things which are memorized, but the memories are fragmented and you can't reach them. If brain is on the throne, it's very easy. So there are invisible books. They all are filled with these memories and they can reach at any time. But if the reptilian brain is on the throne, we have these fragments. And these fragments, they are even contagious. So when you have a lot of fragments, it can be that the helping system could be fragmented as well. So that's a very important part that you identify fragments and that you even identify fragmented helping systems and to unite them. And when this fragment, it is a trigger, touches the Outlook man, then without asking the brain, what do you think? How can we deal with? There are hormones going straight to this lizard, to this reptilian brain, and we have the reptilian, the lizard on the throne. Even we can't understand from outside, and even the person who is in action can't understand it herself or himself. Yeah, that is the main message I have, that there are moments we can't manage out of the brain with our emotions or our dealings, that there are parts in our brain we can't we are not really managing it. If we have a safe place, we can manage better, but it doesn't mean that we always can manage it. At a safe place, the Outlook man is not so sensitive, but nevertheless, these fragments can trigger the outlook man. How many students or how many persons are traumatized or have got these fragments? In normal school classes, there are perhaps 2, 3, 4 of them. If there is a special school, we have for sure even more. If it is an inclusive school, then we have many students too. And it can be that there are traumatized, there are chronified traumas, but we can have students with momentous problems too. And so it is quite normal to have people with some fragments, with some mental difficulties. And it can happen to us too. So it's so normal that it is worth to deal with. Children with fragments or people with fragments, they very often provoke the feeling of ineffectiveness and helplessness with us. And this is linked to trauma. And if we understand that it is linked to trauma and not linked to our own person and our own problems, perhaps, then we can deal much better with it than we think, oh, it's caused by, we are not good enough to deal with this person. Yeah, if somebody has the chance to have got the secure attachment, and it happens in early childhood, in first 2 years, 3 years, then they have the safe place with them. And for me, the symbol of the safe place is this, sorry, I have to have a look at it, is this little house. It is in paper, and that means we always have to take care of the safe place. We have to reinstall it. And somebody who has a secure attachment has the safe place with her or with him. And that helps to cope with difficult situations afterwards, perhaps in the age of 40 or in the age of 15. That is extremely helpful and protects against future traumatization. A secure attachment is built up when we have adult persons dealing with in a very sensitive way with the little child. Yeah, this sensitiveness means that the adult person responds with a fast and appropriate response to the child's needs and actions. And it doesn't have to be a mother or a father, it can be another person too, but it is extremely important in the first 2 or 3 years of a childhood. Yeah, this is an acute psychological trauma. These are symbols of it, and it tells us that the brain is trying to heal it. So it's completely normal that we have a poor memory, that there is avoidance, alertness, difficulties to concentrate, flashbacks, unexpected flashbacks, images behind our eyes coming up at the situation where we don't expect it. It's completely normal. When it is going on, and if it gets more often or bigger, then it is not normal anymore. So it means that we have to find help. these are possible causes. We have to remember that traumatic experiences provoked by human beings are more difficult to cope with than natural disasters. And if there is a person provoking a trauma who is an important person to build up the secure attachment, for instance, a mother or a father, it is even worse. So it is easier to cope with when it is a person we don't know than a person who should give us shelter, to give us the safe place. Yeah, very often at school, we are not directly linked to traumatic experiences. Neglect, for instance, in early childhood happens before we know these children at school. But there might be a huge effect on the school life of this child. Bullying can happen at schools, and it is very important to focus on it. It can destroy mental health of students. Therefore, it's very important to focus on it. Yeah. And here there are the causes of acute trauma and persistent trauma out of the perspective of school. When we have to deal with neglect in early childhood as a school, then we are always confronted with persistent trauma because we are not dealing with the first 2-3 years of a childhood. But if we are, for instance, a social worker, then we can be confronted with an acute trauma by neglect in early childhood. But nevertheless, we are not directly confronted with the acute trauma. Neglect in early childhood can have incredible outcomes during the whole life. Such a child has problems to trust the adults. It has problems to explore, to know, oh, it could be dangerous now. I have to go back to the safe place of where my parents are. It can be it can need the safe place all the time from outside, because the safe place, the secure attachment, is not linked to the person of the child. So it can be a real disaster for a whole life of a child. And from the perspective of the school, we are always too late. We have to deal with the trauma, and yeah, we are too late, and that's very difficult to stand. Yeah, charge transferences in a positive way. You deal very often with charge transferences, perhaps without knowing it. In a very positive way, you smile at the person is smiling back, and you think, oh, life is good. And this is the case here in a positive way between the little Adela and her father. There is a intense, good feeling, wonderful atmosphere going from one person to the other and getting bigger and bigger. So we are here with these transferences, especially if they are charged with difficult emotions. They can get bigger and bigger, and they can lead even to mental illness or to a burnout, for instance. because images are so easy, or are easier to remember, we put everything in these images, because under stress, we don't have really good access to all our abilities. Therefore, we put everything into images. And a person who has a lot of fragmented memories, she tries to get rid of them. That means this person tries to evoke quite similar stories. She hopes, or he hopes, that brain is sitting on the throne and is writing this experience into these books. But at one point, brain is leaving the throne. We have the lizard coming back, and then we have a bad outcome. We don't have this new outcome, a good outcome. We have this bad outcome again. And at the end, we don't have the fragments put in the book. No, we have even more fragments. And we have situations, persons, they were not in charge of our trauma. They are now, they reenact in our play, and they took over the role, the position, for instance, of a persecutor or of a victim. And this is very bad if the same situations are provoked and if there are not new outcomes. And trauma pedagogy helps to identify this reenacting and to find new outcomes. And that is something which is good for everybody, for us, dealing with people with a lot of fragments, and for these people too. Yeah, how do they manage that we take over positions in their reenacted stories? They have invisible carpets, red carpets with them, and they invite us. And there is even some glue on it, so we can't step out of these stories. And if we are part of their stories, they give us the positions from outside, the position of a persecutor, perhaps of a victim, or of a rescuer. And these positions outside, they can provoke very fast dynamics and huge emotions. And very often these children, if it is about students, they have a lot of dynamics and emotions at home. Very often they don't have anybody in the self, in the middle. Self, that means being with brain on the throne. And very often we find us back in these positions outside, in these red positions. And it can change very quickly. I feel as a victim, and then I change to the position of a persecutor. Very, very fast. Yeah, you have it on your, in the film I sent you, you have, I think, these titles in English. It's important to identify these situations, and this triangle is for me extremely helpful to understand very quickly the dynamics. And if I understand these dynamics, I can go back to the self much easier than if I am dealing with all these red positions. It is a trap, this red carpet, and it is not helpful. For nobody it is helpful. We can't say, oh, it's good if they reenact their stories. No, there are bad stories, and we have to lead them to new outcomes. And such a new outcome is possible with the concept of the good reason. You might have a good reason that it's everything. It's not more. So it's very simple, and it must be simple because when we are in these red carpet situations, then it is very quickly that we are on this red carpet, and we have to remember this simple but very efficient sentence. You might have a good reason that. And don't tell them you might have a reason. It is a good reason, perhaps not from our perspective, but for them. They could, with this unacceptable behavior for us, they could manage, they could perhaps even survive. You might have a good reason that. You can think it. You don't have to express it by words. And if I deal with persons I don't speak their language, I tell them nevertheless in English or in German. It is an attitude, and they have very good antennas. So they understand it very easily without understanding the real words. You might have a good reason that you, and then we tell about their actions. And then we have this letter G. It is like a gift. A gift I wouldn't like to accept. Yeah, here. It is the concordant transferences, the symbol of this. So if I feel a lot of ineffectiveness, a lot of helplessness, it's always worth to think over, is it my ineffectiveness, my helplessness? And very often I have to tell, no, this is not the main topic of my life. It is the gift of the person I'm dealing with. And if I understand that it is a gift and that it is not my own feeling, I can deal with this ineffectiveness and helplessness. I understand much better the person in front of me, and I can lead them to effectiveness, that they feel again that they are effective, that they can manage something. And therefore, at school and everywhere where we deal with affected people, it's worth to lead them to effectiveness with gardening, with working with animals, with cooking, baking. You must see the result afterwards. And if we feel ineffective or helpless, we don't have the idea to lead them to effectiveness. Therefore, it's very important to identify gifts. Gifts we wouldn't like to get, but at the end it's helpful because we can construct our pedagogic dealings. Yeah, I come back to this girl, 14 years old, 2 years, a journey of 2 years from Nigeria to Switzerland with a lot of traumatic experiences, I assume. The arrival in Switzerland wasn't easy either, and so she couldn't manage a very simple thing. She couldn't make a knot in a thread. This provokes a lot of ineffectiveness and helplessness in the feeling of her teacher. And this was a gift. And if you understand that this is a gift, then you can lead her to effectiveness. You can take the position in the middle, in the self. You are not a victim, and you don't get to the position of a persecutor or a rescuer. You stay in the middle, and there are concordant transferences as well. That means if you, as a teacher, has your own safe place, you can give it to this girl. And we don't have to know about the details. And that is very helpful for us. As teachers, it could be, we could be overwhelmed by these facts. We don't have to ask her. But she had traumatic experiences. And when we lead her out of our positions of the self to effectiveness, to the future, so it helps her very much. And I talked to the teachers of her. I said, oh, you are really making a good job. You lead her, you stand her. Please stay in the position of self. Don't feel as a victim. She tells you, she reenacts her difficult experiences. It was very helpful. They did talk to the girl. 2 weeks later, they sent me an email and they told me it's much better. It's very often, it's an attitude. Yeah, the example I jump over, you have it on the video. It is the reenaction of by a boy who leads us to the hypothesis that he doesn't have a secure attachment. And so hypotheses, they can be very helpful to understand very quickly a special situation. So it's worth to think about. Yeah, the teachers, she tells him, go out. And this is a symbol. You are not part of our community. You're fragmented, you're separated. And we have to take them into our community. We really have to make the opposite. People with a lot of fragments, they introduce us to provoke more fragments, but we have to do the opposite. We have to integrate them. We have to unite people. Yeah. This is the position. I asked you in the videos to think over your own position out of our own history. Perhaps we are leaded easily to one of these positions, perhaps to a rescuer or to a victim or to a persecutor, but at the same time, it is the situation we are dealing with which leads us to in a special red position outside. And it can change very, very quickly. Yeah, safe place. When we know very well about our brain, how it works, especially under pressure, if we can identify transference phenomena, it can help us to build up our safe place. And there are many other ideas how we can build up the safe place. We have identified in our project these safe places. There was the school in Rome. It was a vocational school for especially young migrants. out of social weak families, financial weak families. The school itself had big financial problems, but what they had, what was common to everybody, they have a mobile phone. And so everybody was linked to the other by his mobile phone, even the teachers, and there was no abuse. Everybody had the phone numbers of the teachers, they had the phone numbers of their students, and if there was a problem, they could send messages, and it was the safe place of these young people here. It was a wonderful example. With no money, no additional money, you can install the safe place. So it was really, it touched my heart when I saw them dealing with their students. Yeah. Another school, it was a very, an old school before, in a very, very bad shape, overcrowded by students. There were 2 times so many students as it was planned. And then they built a new school and they focused on the safe place. And they identified that the toilets are not a real safe place in the new building or in the old building, and they changed them. So there were walls between one toilet to the other, and in the washing, where they washed the hands in this area, it was open. So there was a social control. Before, there was a lot of bullying in this area, protected by doors. In the area of the boys, a woman couldn't step in, the opposite of the toilet of the girls. So it took place, many difficult things took place behind these doors. They opened it, and it is a message. It is a message. We protect you, and we have a look at bullying. And you can't imagine, I knew the school before, I know them today. It has changed in an incredible way. I'm very, very much impressed. And it doesn't cost anything, even it's cheaper without doors. Yeah, toilets you need at every school. And there is another method, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. They have more than 350 teachers, and they all have the same method to get the attention of the students. And especially for students with special needs, it's simple. It helps them to identify, oh, everybody makes it with the hands and talking. So there are 2, it's much easier for them to understand it. And they stand near the door every morning, 2 teachers greeting the students and overseeing if there are any dynamics. And if I have a problem as a student, I can go to these teachers and tell them. So there are many good ideas how they can install the safe place. It doesn't cost anything. And it changes the attitude of the teachers. The Polish school, they had a special look at transitions. They understood that when new students are entering this school, it might be quite difficult for them. So they installed at the beginning of the new school year welcome day. They walked or hiked with the whole school, with all students, to a nice place in the middle of the wood. It took them about 2 hours of walk, and then they played. They had something to eat. something to eat, cooperate, playing, making games. It is always helpful to create a good feeling of being together, of connections. And the Romanian school, they have a lot of knowledge about the safe place for hundreds of years. It was in an area where Turkish armies were trying to overwhelm this area. And so they built these fortified churches, and the schools were always beside these fortified churches. So the children were very well protected. If there were any dangers, they could refuge behind the thick walls of these fortified churches, and the parents, of course, they came too. And it is so important to identify the own knowledge about the safe place. And I can imagine that in Croatia too, there is a lot of knowledge over generations, how people can, in difficult circumstances, create the safe place nevertheless. And it's worth to identify it and to build on this knowledge. Yeah, this Romanian village has very difficult circumstances. These were Saxon villages. This was a Saxon village. And when 1990, Ceausescu was killed, or was there were a lot of Germans going back after 900 years being in this area to Germany. And they left their houses over to Roma families. The state put them into these houses. They had a quite different approach to live here. And nowadays, there are about 40% of Roma families living in this village, and it is the huge duty of the school to unite this minority with other minorities. There are still a few Saxon families, there are Romanian families, and there are Hungarian minorities. So it is a huge work to unite these minorities, and out of my perspective, they do it in a incredible good way. They work very well together. That was a lecture I had in this little village of Rushchor. So the people from Sibiu, they had to come to this village. They had to drive on these bad roads they have, and they came. The priest came, the mayor came, there was an NGO, there was the psychiatrist of the village, there were many teachers and other people. They don't have almost no money, but what they have their cooperation. And they realized if they cooperate very well, they help each other to stand with these difficult circumstances. And for me, it was, I'm very impressed by this school. Yeah, and this is Lily Ben and Amit. You have it in front of you in English. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist in the printed form in Croatic. How do in your language? Exactly. Here it is in Arabic. Yeah, we have it in Arabic. yeah, it tells about the safe place of 3 children. They want to set off to an adventure, but it is too much of adventure. It is a very, very awful wood, and it is not a safe place for these children. And I use this book very often to talk with parents. I show them this page. I tell them, I can imagine that your child could be in such a situation. How can we build a better, a safer place for them? What is your idea? Very often we have helpless parents. We not only have helpless students, we have helpless parents too. And if we can lead these parents to more effectiveness, it is very helpful for them. And we have to cooperate, of course. School, parents, we have to cooperate to ensure the safe place for these children. And it gets worse and worse, up then they arrive at Annalene's place. And here you can talk with students, and I recommend to do it with the whole class. You can talk about the safe place. How would a safe place look like for you? Who would wait for you? What would be on the tray? What is your favorite cookie you would like to get? And even you can build the safe place. Every child has a different imagination of a safe place. You can build it in a box, for instance. We do it sometimes with shoe boxes. They can choose their favorite colors, their favorite materials, and they can talk and they can exchange their ideas about the safe place. And it's always important to make thoughts about the safe place in a time we are not endangered. We are not, we are in a good shelter. It's worth. Yeah, they ask, why can we listen to you, Annalena? Why can't we sleep? We can't sleep. During the night, we can't be attentive at school. And she says, yeah, because you're at the safe place. And then she tells them you have to go back. And it's so normal. Sometimes we would like to have all those people with us to protect them, to give them a safe place, but we have to send them back, and very often to places we know they are not really safe. But if they take the safe place with them, they hear it, they listen to it, they feel it, they see it, and they even had this transition object, they can take it with them. And then they go back to this forest, to this wood, and because now they have their safe places with them, this forest looks completely different. It is a nice forest. There is a little monster, but Lily, she has her bell and can press it, and the monster is away afterwards. It is a nice place. It is a safe place. And it's worth to create safe places for students, but even for us. And then one part of this book is a psychoeducation. It's very important that people, students and their parents and other people, they know about the brain, how it is working, and that the lizard is not, can't be managed by us, that the lizard is driven by hormones and sits on the throne, and we can't avoid it. That's really helpful. Yeah. So it's helpful to think about our own safe place, at work, in our families. People with a lot of fragments, they feel a lot of ineffectiveness, and therefore we have to reinstall effectiveness, and we have to focus on resources, and we have to avoid fragmentation. Now you understand fragmentation and this contagious, that they are contagious, and that even the helping system can be fragmented. It's an example too. Out of our Erasmus Plus project, there were students with us from 6 different countries, and they played together. And it is so wonderful how they are linked, how they are cooperating. That is effectiveness. We planted very often because there is such a symbol of hope. Here we produced ketchup. It was a big project too, Erasmus Plus project about food and mental health, and we produced hamburgers. It was called From Zero to a Hamburger, and it took us more than 15 months to produce these hamburgers. Ketchup, it was not always successful. It was too hot, and yeah, there was a little explosion. That was effectiveness too. The resources, and this is such a wonderful example of our English school. There was a slip, and if a teacher was very happy with the action of a student, he filled or she filled in this slip and sent the student to the head teacher. And the head teacher, if there is something very unusual and dangerous, she would stop her work and would focus on this danger. And so she did it in a positive way too. She stopped her work, she talked to this student and for a few minutes and sent him back to school, and had really the focus on the resources, on the positive work. It doesn't cost anything. It is an attitude too, to give positive things the same attention as difficult things. Biography work is extremely important. And here it is important to identify resources. Don't focus on the dark edges, focus on the resources. What did help you to survive? What did help you, or who did help you to cope with this difficult situation? And knowing what our ancestors, how they did cope with this difficult situation, can give us ideas to how we can cope with. And at the same time, it tells us what is our favorite position outside. Is it the position of a rescuer, of a victim, of a persecutor? It can link to our biography. It can. And if we choose more and more the self, we can ensure our safe place and we can give it to other people. And these fragments. This is again this wonderful team in Rushchor, working together, the head teacher on the left, such a warm-hearted woman, the psychologist, then the lady of the NGO, her vice president, and a teacher, working together. Of course, from time to time there are difficulties in the cooperation, but they talk, they identify them, and they know that every women, that every woman here tries to do her best, to give her best. They all have a good reason, perhaps that they don't agree all the time, but this cooperation, this quality of cooperation is a wonderful possibility to give the safe place from outside to students they didn't have learned what a safe place is. Very often they don't have a secure attachment due to their difficult family situations, but they have a safe place at school. Yeah, and I would like to tell you this special story. There was this Erasmus Plus project with Poland, Italy, Spain, England, Romania, and Sweden. And one day when we had a meeting in Romania, the Italian teacher came and she told us this story. Her uncle, she knew that her uncle was an officer in World War II in Italy. And when the Germans took over Italy, they wanted that he will be part of the German army. He didn't agree, so they sent him to a concentration camp. And he had to change from one camp to the other, and he put it together. So that was his tin box, the only thing he owned at that time, and he put all this name together. And you see Przemysl, and Przemysl, that is the town in Poland. We worked together, so it was linked again. There was united in a way with this sort of this soldier. That was this officer. He survived, and he had such a good mental health that he could all these fragments, he could put them together, and in a visible way he put them together on his food tin, again Przemysl, Neribka. And he afterwards, after the war, he put together this journey on a map. He never talked about, but when he died as an old man, having a very good life, they saw that all these memories. And we could, there was much more interest now in this in this camp in Neribka that was in Przemysl than before, because it was linked to a life who was this uncle of our teacher, our partner. And we made an interview that on the right side, it is the Polish teacher from Przemysl, and in the middle, it is the Italian partner. And we were very touched by this story. And it showed us that we are, in a way, we are united too by a lot of historical things, by perhaps simply being human beings, and therefore we have to focus on common things and not on things they could separate us. At the end, there was a big report in a newspaper in Poland, and it showed the whole history in a quite new way, in a very good way. And I was surprised how this soldier could deal with all these memories. He could put them together, the fragments he could put together. Yeah, we are at the end of the presentation.